What if the most profound, world-changing ideas in history weren't born in dusty libraries or quiet contemplation, but forged in the fiery crucible of intense intellectual rivalry? What if the very foundations of Western thought, the concepts that still shape our understanding of justice, truth, and the good life, emerged not from serene pronouncements, but from heated arguments, scathing critiques, and dazzling oratorical duels between brilliant, often antagonistic minds? This wasn't quiet philosophy, this was the world's first philosophical fight club. Forget the marble statues, the serene busts adorning academic halls. Picture instead a figure far more compelling, far more unsettling, a barefooted, unkempt man wandering the bustling agora of ancient Athens. This was Socrates, not a philosopher enshrined in history books, but a magnetic, often infuriating presence. A controversial troublemaker whose penetrating questions could unravel the most confident assertions, a man whose charisma drew both fervent admirers and bitter enemies. He was a force of nature, a gadfly, who delighted in exposing ignorance and challenging the comfortable assumptions of the Athenian elite. His method was relentless cross-examination, his arena the public square, his weapons words, and his truth as he saw it. Socrates didn't write books. His legacy was shaped by those who knew him, who followed him, who debated him. We mostly know him through the lens of his most famous student, Plato, whose dialogues present a compelling, often heroic, portrait of his teacher. But Plato's account is just one perspective, albeit the most influential. Imagine for a moment that Plato's closest friends, his rivals, his critics, figures like Xenophon, Aristophanes, and countless others whose names are less familiar today, they all had their own versions of Socrates, their own interpretations of his teachings, their own critiques of his methods, their own passionate defenses or condemnations of his character. Each saw a different man, each remembered different conversations, each presented a Socrates tailored to their own philosophical agendas and personal experiences. This wasn't a unified school of thought, but a vibrant, often combative, constellation of intellects revolving around a singular enigmatic star. And the stage for all this intellectual fireworks, Athens itself. Not the tranquil, idealized city we often imagine, but a sprawling, vibrant metropolis pulsating with energy, ambition, and danger. A place where ideas were the most valuable currency, where public debate wasn't just a political necessity, but a thrilling spectator sport. Imagine the cacophony of the marketplace, the murmur of the assembly, the passionate rhetoric of the courts, and amidst it all, these intellectual gladiators testing their arguments, honing their logic, and battling for supremacy in the arena of the mind. Here, in this chaotic, brilliant crucible of ancient Greece, a circle of friends and rivals, disciples and detractors, engaged in debates that would echo through millennia. Their exchanges, born of both admiration and antagonism, laid the groundwork for ethics, politics, metaphysics, and logic. This wasn't just philosophy, it was a high-stakes drama played out in the very heart of the ancient world, shaping not just their future, but our own. For centuries, our understanding of Socrates has been filtered, largely through the brilliant but often singular lens of Plato. His dialogues are masterful, foundational to Western thought, and undeniably captivating. But what if that familiar image, the wise, ironic philosopher of the Apology and the Republic, is only part of the story? What if, in focusing so intently on Plato's magnificent portrayal, we've inadvertently overlooked a richer, more complex tapestry of voices and ideas that sprang from Socrates' profound influence. This video isn't just another look at Plato, however essential he is. Instead, it's a journey into a fascinating, somewhat forgotten corner of ancient philosophy, guided by the remarkable work of George Grote, his epic, multi-volume masterpiece, Plato and the Other Companions of Socrates, specifically its third edition, Volume 2. Grote, a meticulous historian, philosopher, and statesman, dedicated years to painstakingly reconstructing the intellectual landscape of Socratic Athens, not just from Plato, but from every available scrap of evidence about the other philosophers who walked alongside, debated with, and learned from Socrates. He becomes our invaluable guide to this lost world of competing Socratic schools. My own perspective, frankly, started much like many of yours. I always knew Plato's version, revered it even as the definitive account. But a persistent, nagging question emerged: what if we're missing half the story? What if the real Socrates was far more diverse in his impact, more varied in the interpretations he inspired than we typically imagine? This isn't an attempt to diminish Plato's monumental contribution, far from it. It's a quest to unearth those other Socratics, the forgotten students, the philosophical rivals, the intellectual heirs who took Socrates' core ideas in wildly different, sometimes even contradictory, directions. It's about piecing together a more human, a more comprehensive, and ultimately, a more nuanced picture of the man and his revolutionary ideas, free from a single dominant narrative. Our journey through Grote's meticulous research will be expansive. Yes, we'll encounter the familiar genius of Plato, but we'll also delve deep into the surprising schools he inspired. We'll meet the rebels who challenged conventional thought, the rigorous logicians who sought absolute truth through Socratic method, and even the hedonists who astonishingly interpreted Socratic wisdom as a path to enlightened pleasure. Each companion offers a unique facet of Socrates, reflecting him through their own distinct philosophical prism. By the end of this series, I promise you a new and profound perspective on one of the foundational figures of Western philosophy. You'll see Socrates not just as Plato's singular mentor, but as a dynamic, multifaceted catalyst whose influence rippled outwards in a dazzling multitude of directions, shaping diverse intellectual currents for centuries to come. Prepare to go beyond Plato and discover the truly missing voices that complete the Socratic chorus. Welcome back to our exploration of George Grote's Plato and the Other Companions of Socrates, where we now dive into the compelling narrative of how one man, a former student, literally forged the image of his teacher into an enduring icon. This chapter, aptly titled Chapter 1 Plato, the superstar crafting the legend, explores not just Socrates, but Plato's unparalleled genius in historical and philosophical myth-making. Indeed, in many respects, Plato wasn't merely Socrates' most diligent student, he was his ultimate biographer, his most articulate advocate, and perhaps his most brilliant brand manager. Through his masterful dialogues, Plato didn't just record Socrates' words, he meticulously curated his persona, refined his philosophical method, and elevated him from a locally infamous street philosopher into the foundational figure of Western thought. It's an extraordinary feat of literary and intellectual construction, a testament to Plato's own formidable powers of composition and persuasion. This brings us to what scholars term the Socratic problem, the perennial challenge of disentangling the historical Socrates from Plato's compelling, often idealized, character. How much of the Socrates we encounter in the dialogues reflects the actual man, his quirks, his arguments, and how much is Plato's own creative embellishment, his vision of what Socrates should have been? While other contemporaries like Xenophon and the comedic playwright Aristophanes also offered glimpses of Socrates, it is Plato's depiction that utterly dominates our collective consciousness, making the real Socrates maddeningly elusive, filtered through the lens of his most gifted admirer. Plato's narrative genius is particularly evident in his early dialogues, none more so than the Apology. Here, Plato crafts a breathtaking account of Socrates' defense at his trial, painting a portrait of unwavering intellectual integrity, moral courage, and serene acceptance in the face of injustice. It's not merely a legal transcript, it's a dramatic masterpiece, imbuing Socrates with a voice that is both profoundly human and utterly defiant, showcasing his distinctive method of questioning and his unshakable commitment to truth, even to his very life. The Apology doesn't just narrate events, it immortalizes them, forging Socrates into a philosophical martyr whose principles resonate across millennia. Consider, without Plato, Socrates might have been little more than a forgotten footnote in the annals of Athenian history. A controversial local figure, perhaps remembered for upsetting a few prominent citizens, but certainly not the towering intellectual giant who profoundly influenced philosophy, ethics, and Western thought itself. It was Plato's decision to dedicate his extraordinary literary talents to preserving and interpreting his teacher's legacy that secured Socrates' place in history, transforming a local enigma into a universal symbol of philosophical inquiry. While Plato painted Socrates as the ultimate philosopher, lost in abstract thought and the pursuit of ideal forms, our understanding of the man would be tragically incomplete, perhaps even skewed, without the invaluable counterpoint provided by another of his devoted companions, Xenophon. A historian, a soldier, and a student, Xenophon offers us a Socrates grounded firmly in the everyday, providing a crucial second opinion to Plato's often lofty and philosophical version. Where Plato's Socrates often soared into the intellectual stratosphere, wrestling with the nature of reality and the ideal forms, Xenophon brings him back down to earth. Xenophon's Socrates isn't primarily a metaphysician, he's a moral compass, a pragmatic guide to living a good, useful, and virtuous life. This is a Socrates concerned less with the ultimate nature of justice in an abstract realm, and more with how to be a just friend, a good citizen, a responsible leader. He teaches practical virtues like temperance, piety, self-sufficiency, and effective management of one's household and affairs. He is the quintessential moralistic teacher, offering actionable wisdom for daily existence. Our primary window into Xenophon's Socrates is his work, the Memorabilia, often translated as Recollections of Socrates. Xenophon penned this as a direct response to accusations against Socrates, aiming to show him not as a subversive innovator, but as a profoundly beneficial and pious man, a wise counselor to all who sought his advice. It's a collection of conversations, anecdotes, and maxims, showcasing Socrates in action, offering practical guidance on everything from governing a state to improving personal conduct. This stark divergence immediately raises a fascinating and crucial question: which Socrates is more real? Which depiction rings truer to the historical figure? Is it Plato's enigmatic sage, forever challenging assumptions and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, seemingly disconnected from the mundane? Or is it Xenophon's accessible teacher, offering actionable wisdom for daily life, a man of profound common sense and moral rectitude, deeply embedded in the social fabric of Athens? The man in the clouds or the man on the street? Grote, in his meticulous examination, finds immense value in these competing narratives. Far from being a hindrance, they are an indispensable aid in our quest for truth. Without Xenophon, we might be left with a caricature, a one-dimensional genius. With him, we gain depth, nuance, and a more robust understanding of the man who inspired such devotion and controversy. Having multiple, sometimes contradictory, accounts forces us to critically evaluate, to look for common threads, and to appreciate the inherent complexity of historical figures. It reminds us that truth, especially historical truth, is often a mosaic, not a single, perfectly smooth stone. Each companion offers a unique piece, and it's in their juxtaposition that a richer picture begins to emerge. Xenophon's Socrates might lack some of Plato's intellectual fireworks, but he provides the crucial ballast, the grounded reality that prevents our perception of Socrates from drifting too far into the purely philosophical ether. He reminds us that Socrates was, first and foremost, a man interacting with other men, grappling with the very real challenges of their lives. We've explored Plato's structured, philosophical response to Socrates, but Socrates' influence was a fertile ground for many, leading to a vibrant tapestry of interpretations. Among his lesser-known yet profoundly impactful students was Antisthenes, the founder of the Cynic school, a name that even today conjures images of radical self-sufficiency and a piercing disdain for convention. Grote, in his meticulous examination, presents Antisthenes as a pivotal figure who took Socrates' core tenets to their most austere and, frankly, most challenging extreme. For Antisthenes, virtue was not merely a good, it was the only good sufficient in itself for eudaimonia or human flourishing. Everything else, wealth, reputation, pleasure, comfort, even knowledge pursued for its own sake, was indifferent, if not an outright obstacle. The path to this ultimate virtue, according to Antisthenes, was to live in accordance with nature. This wasn't a call to retreat to the wilderness, but rather to strip away all artificial needs, desires, and societal constructs that enslave the human spirit. It meant rejecting the elaborate conventions of Athenian society, its pursuit of material gain, its intricate social rituals, and its often hypocritical moral codes. True freedom, for the Cynics, lay in needing nothing but what was truly essential and universally accessible. This philosophy manifested in a stark, uncompromising lifestyle. Antisthenes himself adopted a simple cloak, a staff, and a wallet for his meager possessions. He ate the plainest food, slept wherever he found himself, and scorned the comforts and luxuries that most Athenians deemed essential. But it was his most famous follower, Diogenes of Sinope, who perhaps best epitomized Cynic radicalism. Diogenes famously lived in a large ceramic jar or tub, rejecting even the basic shelter of a house. He performed bodily functions openly, challenged authority figures with audacious wit, and deliberately flouted every social grace imaginable. His actions were not random acts of defiance. They were pointed philosophical statements, demonstrating that human happiness and dignity were entirely independent of external circumstances and societal approval. Diogenes' life was a living, breathing testament to absolute self-sufficiency and utter indifference to public opinion. The echoes of this ancient philosophy resonate surprisingly loudly in our modern world. Consider the rising popularity of minimalism, a movement that actively encourages decluttering, conscious consumption, and valuing experiences over possessions. Or the growing interest in anti-consumerism, where individuals question the relentless pursuit of material goods and the societal pressures to constantly acquire more. The tiny house movement, digital nomads living out of vans, or even the conscious choice to opt out of high-stress corporate careers in favor of a simpler, more purpose-driven existence, all these modern expressions share a spiritual lineage with Antisthenes and Diogenes. They, too, are grappling with the question of what truly constitutes a good life, and often arrive at answers that involve shedding the superfluous and embracing a more fundamental, less complicated way of being. They represent a contemporary yearning for the same freedom from external compulsion that the Cynics championed millennia ago. It's fascinating to trace how Socrates' simple injunction to know thyself could lead to such divergent paths. For Plato, self-knowledge was a prerequisite for building an ideal state, a just society where individuals played their part within a carefully constructed social order. For Antisthenes and the Cynics, however, knowing oneself meant recognizing the inherent corruptibility and artificiality of such external structures. It meant stripping away the layers of convention to discover an authentic self unburdened by societal expectations. This radical self-awareness, they argued, inevitably led to a complete and often defiant rejection of society's dictates. Why conform when conformity merely binds you to chains of unnecessary desire and false esteem? Why seek external validation when true virtue, and thus true happiness, resides entirely within? Antisthenes, then, stands as a powerful counterpoint to Plato. He represents the path where Socratic inquiry, instead of culminating in a grand philosophical system or an ideal republic, dissolves into radical individual liberation. The Cynics challenged the very foundations of what it meant to be a citizen, a member of society, or even a respectable person. They were the original minimalists, pushing the boundaries of what was truly necessary for a virtuous and fulfilling life, and their legacy continues to provoke thought and inspire alternative ways of living even today. Welcome back to Plato and the Other Companions of Socrates, our deep dive into George Grote's monumental work. Today, we step into a truly fascinating and perhaps surprising corner of Socratic thought. We're turning our attention to Chapter 4, where we uncover the story of Aristippus of Cyrene, a name that, for many, is synonymous with the pursuit of pleasure. Aristippus, a direct contemporary and follower of Socrates, represents one of the most divergent branches of Socratic philosophy. While some of Socrates' students gravitated towards asceticism or rigorous intellectualism, Aristippus founded the Cyrenaic school, boldly proclaiming that the ultimate good in life is pleasure. This wasn't a call for mindless self-indulgence, but rather a sophisticated, intelligent pursuit of immediate, bodily pleasures. For Aristippus, the only truly knowable and certain experiences were our sensations, particularly those of pleasure and pain. Thus, the goal was to maximize the former and minimize the latter, but always with a rational, present-moment focus. He understood that excessive attachment or uncontrolled desires could lead to pain, so a wise Cyrenaic cultivated a detached yet appreciative attitude towards pleasure, enjoying it fully while it lasted, without letting it enslave him. It was about having pleasure, not being had by it. Now, to truly grasp the profound diversity of Socratic thought, let's place Aristippus directly alongside another of Socrates' famous students, Diogenes of Sinope, the founder of the Cynic school. While Aristippus embraced pleasure, Diogenes famously lived in a tub, spurning all material comforts, societal conventions, and indeed, most forms of pleasure, seeing them as hindrances to true virtue and freedom. He actively courted discomfort and hardship. Think about that for a moment. One teacher, Socrates, inspiring one student to seek pleasure intelligently, and another to deliberately reject it entirely. This presents us with an extraordinary paradox. How could a single mentor, Socrates, inspire such radically different, almost antithetical, life philosophies? The answer lies in Socrates' method itself. He didn't offer a prescriptive dogma or a rigid set of rules for living. Instead, he challenged individuals to know themselves, to critically examine their beliefs, and to live a virtuous life according to reason. His influence was less about providing answers and more about cultivating the capacity for ethical inquiry and self-direction. Each student, through their unique lens, interpreted what a good life meant and how to achieve it, informed by Socrates' relentless questioning. Aristippus, like Diogenes, believed he was living the truly good and virtuous life, but his definition of good and the path to it lay in a profoundly different direction. This leads to our final, compelling question: can a life focused on pleasure still be considered philosophical and virtuous? For Aristippus, the answer was a resounding yes. A philosophical life for him involved a rational understanding of human nature and the world, leading to the insight that present, positive sensations are our highest good. Virtue, in the Cyrenaic sense, was the skill, the intellectual mastery, to navigate the world in a way that maximizes these pleasures while minimizing pain. It required discipline, self-awareness, and a certain detachment, a sophisticated form of control over one's responses to external circumstances. It wasn't about being a slave to every whim, but about judiciously selecting and appreciating the most vivid and immediate pleasures available. To be truly virtuous, in this view, was to be an expert in the art of living well, which, for Aristippus, meant living pleasurably, but with intelligence and freedom. Aristippus challenges our conventional notions of virtue and the good life. His philosophy reminds us that even within the seemingly unified sphere of Socratic influence, there was an exhilarating intellectual ferment producing ideas that continue to provoke and intrigue us thousands of years later. From Athens, our journey now takes us to Megara and into the intellectual orbit of Euclides, a distinct interpreter of Socratic thought. Euclides, one of Socrates' most devoted disciples, wasn't content to simply absorb his master's ethical inquiries. Instead, he forged a new path, founding the Megarian school, a fascinating current blending Socratic moral earnestness with Zeno's mind-bending logical paradoxes. Imagine thinkers who treated philosophy not merely as a pursuit of wisdom, but a high-stakes game of pure logic. Compared to Plato's grand theater of ideas or Aristotle's meticulous research lab, the Megarian school was the ultimate intellectual sparring ring. These were, without a doubt, the logicians, or, dare I say, the philosophy nerds of the Socratic circle. Their conversations weren't casual chats, they were intricate intellectual duels, where every premise was scrutinized, every conclusion mercilessly tested. They were fascinated by logical puzzles, rigorous argumentation, and most notably, proving arguments through contradiction. Like Zeno before them, The Megarians delighted in exposing the flaws in opposing viewpoints, not by offering alternative truths, but by demonstrating how an argument's foundations led to absurdity or self-refutation. They were the masters of reductio ad absurdum, pushing their interlocutors to a point where their own statements collapsed under logical pressure. Victory for them lay not just in being right, but in meticulously demonstrating why opponents had to be wrong by inviolable logical rules. Their intellectual rigor wasn't mere mental gymnastics. Beneath their logical puzzles lay a profound metaphysical and ethical core. For Euclides and his followers, there was but one single, unchanging good. This good wasn't merely abstract. They equated it directly with being itself, the essence of reality. Any multiplicity or change in goodness was dismissed as illusory and illogical. This unitary good was the unyielding foundation of all existence and virtue, discoverable not empirically, but through pure reason. They were, in essence, trying to distill Socratic ethics into its most logically consistent, irreducible form. In doing so, the Megarians pushed the Socratic method of inquiry, the famed Elenchus cross-examination and refutation, to its absolute logical limits. Socrates had used questioning to expose ignorance and prompt deeper thought. The Megarians took this a step further, wielding the Socratic blade of inquiry with surgical precision, dissecting arguments until any inconsistency was laid bare. Their aim was not just clarity, but an unassailable truth founded purely on logical necessity. They sought an ethics so robust, so intellectually pure, that it could withstand any assault of paradox or contradiction. Often overshadowed by Plato and Aristotle, Euclides and the Megarians represent a vital, if intimidating, branch of Socratic philosophy. They remind us that Socrates' legacy wasn't a monolithic doctrine, but a vibrant, contested intellectual landscape where even the pursuit of good became a thrilling, high-stakes game of logical deduction. Welcome back to our journey through George Grote's monumental work on Plato and his companions. In Chapter 6, we delve into one of the most celebrated and often misunderstood aspects of Socratic philosophy, the Socratic method. Often caricatured as merely asking a lot of questions, the reality, as Grote so meticulously details, is far richer, more potent, and indeed, more frustrating than commonly imagined. It was a rigorous intellectual exercise, a powerful tool for revealing ignorance, and a challenging path towards genuine self-knowledge. At its heart, the Socratic method is an Elenchus, a process of cross-examination. It begins not with Socrates offering his own theories, but by probing the stated beliefs of an interlocutor. Imagine you confidently claim to know what good leadership entails. A good leader is decisive and always knows the right answer. Socrates, with gentle probing, wouldn't immediately disagree. Instead, he'd ask, is a leader always decisive, even when lacking full information, truly good? Could one who always thinks they know the answer ever learn or adapt? Does decisiveness alone suffice when consensus building is paramount? He wouldn't directly refute your initial claim, but would explore its implications, drawing out contradictions. Gradually, as you try to defend your initial, robust definition, you find yourself cornered, forced to concede points that undermine your original assertion. This systematic dismantling wasn't about winning an argument or shaming. The true objective was to lead the interlocutor to aporia, a profound perplexity, a moment of intellectual impasse, where one realizes they don't know what they thought they knew. It's that jarring realization, that uncomfortable void where your conceptual framework crumbles. For Socrates, this was not failure but a vital first step. Only when you acknowledge your ignorance, when you admit "I don't know," can you truly begin to seek knowledge. It echoes his famous declaration, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing," not as absolute ignorance, but an understanding of the vastness of what remains unknown, even in familiar concepts. Now imagine being on the receiving end, having your deeply held, unexamined beliefs forming part of your identity, systematically picked apart, line by line. It wasn't comfortable. It was often profoundly frustrating, even humiliating. People resented Socrates precisely because he exposed their intellectual nakedness. Their initial confidence, perhaps born of societal convention or superficial understanding, was stripped away, leaving them feeling foolish and exposed. This wasn't a polite discussion. It was an intellectual wrestling match designed to shake you out of complacency, to force confrontation with your unexamined assumptions. Yet, for Socrates and those who truly grasped the method, this discomfort was the point. The Socratic method was, above all, a tool for intellectual humility. It taught that genuine understanding begins with a critical self-assessment of one's knowledge. It challenged the hubris of assuming one knew simply because one could articulate a common opinion. By forcing individuals to confront the limits of their understanding, it paved the way for rigorous inquiry, for seeking truth, not via dogmatic assertion, but through patient, critical examination of ideas. It was a call to intellectual modesty, an insistence that true wisdom isn't found in asserting what you think you know, but in constantly questioning, constantly learning, and always being prepared to admit, "I might be wrong." Welcome back to our exploration of George Grote's monumental work on Plato and his companions. While we often focus on grand philosophical ideas, Grote, with his meticulous scholarship, reminds us that these were real people, living real lives, forging relationships as vital to their philosophical journey as any abstract argument. In this chapter, The Inner Circle, we pull back the curtain on the human landscape surrounding Socrates, revealing a vibrant community built on friendship, loyalty, and shared wisdom. Imagine ancient Athens, not as a collection of dusty texts, but as a bustling, living city. Much of their philosophical life unfolded in the open air, amidst the everyday rhythms of the agora. Socrates wasn't confined to a lecture hall. He was a familiar figure, strolling the marketplace, engaging anyone and everyone. His companions often joined him, walking, talking, stopping to debate a point, or simply observing the city's pulse. These weren't structured classes, they were spontaneous intellectual encounters, often sparked by a simple question or a chance observation. As day turned to evening, the intellectual exchange often transitioned to the Athenian symposia. Forget the modern image of a wild party while wine flowed. These were more than mere drinking sessions. They were intimate gatherings, often in private homes, where conversation, poetry, music, and philosophical discussion intermingled. In these relaxed, intellectually charged environments, surrounded by friends, profound ideas were debated and refined. Grote carefully pieces together accounts from Plato and Xenophon, showing us the witty banter, the serious arguments, and the deep affection that characterized these gatherings. Within this broader circle, certain friendships stood out, exemplifying the deep bonds underpinning their shared intellectual adventure. Take Crito, for instance. Not a philosopher like Plato, his loyalty to Socrates was absolute. We see this vividly in Socrates' imprisonment. It was Crito who tirelessly pleaded for Socrates to escape, offering to arrange everything, demonstrating a profound personal devotion that transcended mere intellectual admiration. Grote highlights this act not just as a historical event, but as a testament to the powerful human bond between mentor and friend. Then there was Phaedo, another member of this inner circle, who gives his name to one of Plato's most poignant dialogues. His presence, his experiences within this group, shaped his own later philosophical contributions, illustrating how the dynamic interplay of personalities fostered intellectual growth. And consider Aeschines, a lesser-known Socratic associate whose own writings, though largely lost, attest to the diverse individuals drawn to Socrates' unique charisma. This was not a formal academy with tuition fees and a fixed curriculum. As Grote emphasizes, it was a social network, an organic community bound by shared intellectual curiosity and mutual respect. Socrates was not a schoolmaster but a catalyst, a provocateur of thought. His students were his companions, his friends, engaging with him on an equal footing. They were company travelers on a journey of self-discovery and philosophical inquiry. The informal nature of these interactions, casual walks, spirited symposia, fostered genuine, uninhibited exploration of ideas, creating a dynamic intellectual environment unlike any formal institution. Grote's genius lies in reconstructing this vibrant social world from ancient literature's surviving fragments. He doesn't just analyze philosophical arguments, he meticulously sifts through biographical details, incidental remarks, and cultural contexts to paint a vivid picture of these daily interactions. He helps us see beyond abstract concepts to the warm, often humorous, sometimes challenging, but always deeply human connections that formed Socratic philosophy's bedrock. Through Grote's lens, we gain a crucial insight. Philosophy, at its genesis in Athens, was deeply communal. It was nurtured in conversation, sharpened by debate, and enriched by the loyalty and affection of friends. The legacy of Socrates isn't just a collection of arguments, but a testament to the power of a community dedicated to the relentless pursuit of truth, bound by the profound ties of friendship. This human dimension, so carefully elucidated by Grote, makes the philosophical journey of Socrates and his companions resonate even today. Now we arrive at what is arguably Plato's most ambitious and influential work, the Republic. Picture an ancient Greek philosopher, having witnessed Athens' tumultuous political landscape, setting out to design, from the ground up, a perfect society. A grand utopian blueprint, meticulously crafted, intended to achieve true justice and human flourishing. But as we delve into its intricate design, we must ask, is this a sublime dream or a carefully veiled nightmare? At the heart of Plato's ideal city, Callipolis, lies the revolutionary concept of the philosopher-king. Plato argues that states will only cease suffering when philosophers become kings or kings become true philosophers. These aren't just wise rulers, they are individuals dedicated to the pursuit of truth and ultimate forms, trained rigorously from childhood to govern with pure reason, devoid of personal ambition or material desire. This leadership structure is deeply intertwined with Plato's understanding of the human soul itself, which he famously divides into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. In the just individual, reason rules, guided by spirit, controlling appetites. Similarly, in the perfectly just city, philosopher kings represent reason, guardians or military represent spirit, and the vast class of producers and commoners represent appetite. Each class performs its specific role, maintaining societal harmony through specialization and a strict hierarchy based on aptitude. However, the path to this perfect harmony is paved with some rather controversial proposals. Perhaps the most infamous is the noble lie, a carefully constructed myth told to all citizens about their origins. It posits they were all born from the earth, mixed with different metals: gold for rulers, silver for guardians, and bronze or iron for farmers and craftsmen. This myth, while acknowledged as a fabrication by rulers, instills shared identity and justifies hierarchy, encouraging citizens to accept their predetermined place. More radically, for guardians and philosopher kings, Plato proposes the abolition of private property and, astonishingly, the traditional family. Guardians would live communally, sharing possessions, children raised collectively by the state, without knowing biological parents. This extreme measure eliminates conflicts of interest, preventing distraction from duty, ensuring complete devotion to the common good, unburdened by personal attachments or wealth. Given these strictures, communal living for rulers, predetermined roles based on myth, carefully constructed narratives, I must ask, would you want to live in Plato's perfect city? Would the promise of absolute justice and harmony outweigh the profound loss of individual freedom, personal ambition, and the traditional bonds of family? Plato's Republic isn't merely an ancient philosophical text, it's a foundational inquiry into the nature of justice, power, and the ideal state that continues to resonate powerfully today. Its core questions: who should rule, how power should be distributed, what sacrifices individuals make for the collective good, echo in contemporary debates around meritocracy, social engineering, and the balance between individual liberty and state control. Is a society where every individual is perfectly aligned with their societal function truly free, or is it a gilded cage? Plato forces us to confront these truths and consider the stark choices between competing ideals. Welcome to our exploration of Plato's most abstract, yet profoundly influential concept, the theory of forms. Grote meticulously analyzes this cornerstone of Platonic metaphysics, recognizing its unparalleled impact on Western thought. To grasp this challenging idea, Plato offers us the powerful allegory of the cave. Imagine prisoners chained since birth in a deep cave, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire burns, and between the fire and prisoners, figures hold objects, casting shadows onto the wall. For the prisoners, these flickering shadows are their entire reality. Now, picture one prisoner freed. Turning towards the fire is painful. They struggle to comprehend the actual objects are more real than the shadows. This individual is then dragged out of the cave into the blinding sunlight. Initially, they see nothing clearly. Gradually, they see reflections, then objects, then the moon and stars, and finally, the sun itself, the ultimate source of light. This allegory illustrates our human condition. The cave is our sensory, everyday world of appearances. The prisoners are us, often content with limited perceptions. The flickering shadows are the imperfect, transient things we experience: chairs, beautiful objects, acts of justice. These are mere copies. The arduous ascent out of the cave symbolizes the painful intellectual journey beyond mere opinion. The sunlit world outside is Plato's realm of forms. Plato posits a higher reality, an ideal, unchanging world of perfect forms. These forms are not physical, they are abstract, eternal blueprints or essences. Every chair, every just act, Every beautiful thing we encounter is just an imperfect copy of its corresponding perfect form. Consider the form of the chair, not any specific chair, but the ideal essence of chairness itself. All physical chairs participate in this perfect form. Similarly, there is a perfect form of justice, a perfect form of beauty, existing independently. These forms are the true objects of knowledge. The sun in the allegory represents the highest form, the form of the good, ultimate source of truth. This concept speaks to our inherent longing for perfection. When we strive for justice, create art, or seek truth, we are, in essence, reaching for these perfect forms. It suggests a deeper meaning, a yearning for genuine perfection beyond our mutable physical existence. Plato's theory of forms became a foundational cornerstone of Western thought for over 2 millennia. It framed understanding of reality, knowledge, ethics, and aesthetics. It deeply influenced Neoplatonism, early Christian theology forms as divine ideas, and medieval scholasticism. Its dualism between the material and the ideal profoundly shaped subsequent philosophy. Even the scientific search for universal laws echoes this Platonic quest for underlying truths. Through the allegory of the cave and the theory of forms, Plato challenges us to question reality, embark on an intellectual journey, and seek knowledge not in fleeting appearances, but in the eternal bedrock of perfect ideals. Grote's scholarship helps us grasp why Plato's vision remains vital today. Chapter 10, Socratic Love, the Ladder to the Divine, delves into one of Plato's most celebrated dialogues, the Symposium. Here, Grote explores Socrates' vision of love not just as emotion, but as a transformative ladder ascending from earthly desires to wisdom and divine beauty. The Symposium depicts a dinner party at Agathon's, where guests including Aristophanes and Socrates decide to praise Eros, the god of love. Their speeches present diverse views. Phaedrus sees love as inspiring virtue, Pausanias differentiates between base common love and noble heavenly love, Eryximachus views love as a cosmic harmony. Aristophanes famously recounts the myth of original spherical beings, split by Zeus, with love being the quest for our other half. Agathon praises love as the source of all good things. The philosophical core, however, is Socrates' speech, conveying the teachings of the priestess Diotima. She asserts love is not a god, but a demon, born of plenty and poverty, a spirit mediating between mortals and gods. Love, Diotima explains, is fundamentally a desire for beauty and goodness, a yearning for immortality through their possession. Diotima's ladder of love describes the soul's progressive ascent. It begins with love for a single beautiful body. The lover soon realizes beauty exists in all beautiful bodies, prompting a shift. The next rung involves appreciating beautiful souls, valuing inner character, intelligence, and virtue over physical form. This leads to loving beautiful practices and laws, then beautiful knowledge, the sciences, and intellectual pursuits. The ultimate rung is the apprehension of the form of beauty itself, not a specific object, but beauty in its absolute, eternal, unchanging, pure essence. This is the source of all particular beauties. To grasp this form is to achieve true wisdom, apprehend the divine, and experience spiritual immortality, transcending fleeting physical existence. In this context, Platonic love finds its original meaning. Far from today's common understanding of non-sexual friendship, Platonic love, in the Symposium, signifies a love beginning with physical attraction but ascending beyond it. It directs focus towards higher, non-physical ideals, beauty of character, knowledge, and ultimately, the form of beauty itself. It seeks the eternal good and wise, transcending individual forms to grasp universal essence. These ancient ideas, articulated by Plato through Socrates, still shape our understanding of love. The notion of love as a journey evolving beyond initial physical attraction resonates powerfully. Plato challenges us to seek beyond the superficial, to appreciate the beauty of character, intellect, and virtue. His ladder encourages a quest for higher meaning, suggesting fulfilling love involves pursuing wisdom, truth, and the divine. The symposium offers a timeless invitation to a transformative ascent, reminding us that love, in its highest form, is a path to profound understanding and lasting connection. Welcome to Chapter 11, the trial martyr for truth or public nuisance. After decades of questioning the very fabric of Athenian society, the gadfly of Athens, Socrates, finally found himself in the crosshairs of the police. As meticulously detailed by Grote, this was no mere philosophical dispute, it was a dramatic climax, fraught with political intrigue and profound social anxieties. The official charges brought against Socrates by Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon were seemingly straightforward. First, asabeia, or impiety, failing to acknowledge the gods recognized by the state and introducing new divinities, and second, corrupting the youth. On the surface, these accusations painted Socrates as a religious deviant and a dangerous influence on the impressionable minds of Athens' next generation. However, Grote, along with many other historians, argues convincingly that these formal charges were little more than a thin veil for deeper, more complex resentments. Athens had just emerged from the devastating Peloponnesian War, a conflict that had left the city economically shattered, politically unstable, and deeply suspicious of any perceived threat to its fragile democracy. In this climate of fear and suspicion, Socrates, with his relentless questioning of authority and tradition, became an easy scapegoat. His intellectual circle included figures like Alcibiades, a brilliant but ultimately treacherous general, and Critias, a notorious leader of the brutal 30 tyrants who had briefly overthrown Athenian democracy. While Socrates never explicitly endorsed their political actions, the association was damning in the eyes of a recovering democracy desperate to find culprits for its recent woes. His philosophical method, which encouraged independent thought and often exposed the ignorance of powerful men, undoubtedly alienated many influential Athenians who now saw an opportunity for retribution. Plato's Apology gives us a vivid, if idealized, window into Socrates' courtroom demeanor. Far from begging for mercy or offering a conventional defense, Socrates presented a defiant, almost provocative address. He portrayed himself not as a criminal, but as a divine gift to Athens, a gadfly sent by the gods to sting the sluggish state into action and prompt self-examination. He famously declared that he would obey God rather than men, refusing to abandon his philosophical mission, stating unequivocally that an unexamined life is not worth living. His uncompromising stance even extended to his proposed counterpenalty. Instead of a fine or exile, he suggested he should be honored with free meals for life in the Prytaneum, an honor usually reserved for Olympic victors. This audacious defense, while inspiring to subsequent generations, undoubtedly alienated many of the 501 jurors, reinforcing their perception of him as an arrogant and unrepentant threat. Unsurprisingly, the jury found him guilty. The vote for the death penalty was also close, but ultimately sealed his fate. Socrates faced his death by hemlock with characteristic serenity, choosing to uphold the laws of Athens even as they condemned him, rather than escape into exile. So, as we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, we must ask ourselves, was Socrates a hero who died a martyr for free speech and intellectual integrity, a man unjustly punished for the simple act of pursuing truth? Or was he, as his accusers contended, a dangerous nuisance, a destabilizing force whose relentless questioning and influence on the youth genuinely threatened the fragile recovery of Athenian democracy? We invite you to be the jury. How would you have cast your vote? Socrates is gone. The hemlock has done its work. Athens breathes perhaps a sigh of relief or perhaps a gasp of dismay, but for his immediate followers, the world has shifted on its axis. The magnetic force that held them together, the central figure around whom their intellectual lives revolved, is no longer there. His death was not an end, however, but a potent, dramatic beginning for a sprawling philosophical inheritance. What followed was an intellectual battle royale, a profound and fascinating legacy scramble where the prize was nothing less than the very definition of what it meant to be Socratic. His students, bereft and dispersed, didn't simply pack up their intellectual tents and go home. Instead, they scattered across the Hellenic world, each carrying a piece of the Socratic spirit, a memory of his teachings, and crucially, their own interpretation of his core philosophy. From this scattering, a vibrant, often contentious, array of schools emerged, all laying claim to the master's mantle. Consider the Cynics, championed by Antisthenes and later Diogenes. For them, Socrates' emphasis on virtue and self-sufficiency, his disdain for material wealth and conventional society, was paramount. They saw him as the ultimate embodiment of minimalist living, rejecting societal norms and embracing a life in accordance with nature, independent of external goods. Their Socrates was a radical individualist, fiercely independent, living his truth with uncompromising integrity. Then there were the Cyrenaics, founded by Aristippus. They interpreted Socrates' pursuit of the good life in a very different light. If happiness was the goal and virtue was knowledge, then for Aristippus, the highest good was immediate, pleasurable sensation. Their Socrates was a pragmatist, advocating for the skillful acquisition and enjoyment of present pleasures, discerning and wise in his approach to individual experience rather than a rigorous ascetic. The Megarians under Euclides focused intensely on Socrates' logical method and his relentless pursuit of definitions. They extrapolated his dialectical approach into a profound interest in paradoxes, logic, and the unity of the good, often merging Socratic and Eleatic ideas. Their Socrates was the master logician, the relentless questioner who sought an ultimate, singular truth through rigorous intellectual combat. And, of course, there were the Platonists. Plato, arguably Socrates' most famous student, absorbed and transformed his teacher's legacy into something grander, more systematic, and deeply metaphysical. His academy, with its focus on abstract forms, political philosophy, and the immortality of the soul, built upon Socratic foundations, but soared into realms of thought that went far beyond mere ethical inquiry. Plato presented a Socrates who was a gateway to transcendent truths, a philosophical guide to a complete and ideal way of life. Now it's easy, in hindsight, to see Plato's interpretation as the correct one, the one that ultimately won the legacy scramble. But as George Grote painstakingly demonstrates in Plato and the other companions of Socrates, such an outcome was far from inevitable. Grote challenges us to resist the teleological temptation, to understand that in the immediate aftermath of Socrates' death, each of these nascent schools presented a compelling, arguably equally valid, claim to be the true heir. Plato's eventual triumph, the sheer weight of his literary output, and the enduring power of his philosophical system solidified his Socrates in the historical imagination. But for decades, it was a genuine contest, a vibrant, intellectual free-for-all. What Grote so brilliantly underlines is that the richness Socrates' legacy lies precisely in this diversity, not in the imposition of a single, monolithic doctrine. Socrates didn't leave behind a dogmatic system. He left a spirit of inquiry, a method of questioning, a profound commitment to self-knowledge and ethical living. His teaching was, in essence, a challenge to think for oneself, to pursue virtue, and to critically examine all assumptions. This open-ended, catalytic nature of his philosophy allowed for a multitude of interpretations, each reflecting a different facet of his complex personality and thought. The legacy scramble wasn't a failure to coalesce around a single truth. It was a testament to the profound, generative power of a mind that inspired so many to seek truth in their own diverse ways. It is in this kaleidoscope of Socratic successors that we truly grasp the enduring, multifaceted genius of the man. Welcome back. As we delve further into the labyrinthine world of ancient Greek philosophy and politics, it's crucial to pause and consider the unique lens through which we're primarily viewing it, the monumental work of George Grote. Our source text, Plato and the Other Companions of Socrates, is no mere academic treatise. It is the crowning intellectual project of a truly singular figure of the 19th century. George Grote was not just a historian, he was, first and foremost, a radical politician deeply committed to democratic ideals. This isn't a mere biographical footnote, it is the very bedrock upon which his colossal, 12-volume History of Greece and subsequently his intricate 3-volume exploration of Socratic thought was built. Imagine a prominent member of Parliament in Victorian England actively campaigning for universal suffrage, the secret ballot, and other foundational democratic reforms, then turning his formidable intellect to ancient Athens. His direct engagement with modern political struggles wasn't separate from his historical scholarship. Indeed, it profoundly informed it. Grote approached ancient history with the conviction of a man who believed deeply in the practical, transformative power of popular self-governance, a belief forged in the crucible of his own political activism and experience. This unique vantage point allowed Grote to see ancient Athens not as a quaint, distant relic, but as a vibrant, living testament to the strengths and, yes, the inherent complexities of direct democracy. He harbored a profound admiration for Athenian democracy, often seeing it as unjustly maligned or profoundly misunderstood by subsequent aristocratic or monarchist-leaning historians. Indeed, one of his central driving forces was a fervent desire to rescue the myriad other Socratic voices, the companions, the interlocutors, the thinkers who interacted with Socrates, but whose invaluable contributions and perspectives had been largely overshadowed, even actively suppressed, by the towering philosophical edifice of Plato. For centuries, Plato's dialogues had presented his interpretation of Socrates, and often Plato's own critical, anti-democratic stance on Athenian society. Grote aimed to correct this historical imbalance, to give full voice to the intellectual pluralism and diverse philosophical currents that he believed truly characterized Socrates' era, challenging the monolithic Platonic narrative. Therefore, Plato and the other companions of Socrates becomes more than just a scholarly work. It stands as a character in its own right within our broader narrative. It is a passionate, painstaking act of historical revisionism, a deliberate, deeply personal effort to present a more nuanced, balanced, and, in Grote's view, a more truthful account of ancient Athenian intellectual life and its democratic foundations. By understanding Grote's own political convictions and his motivations for undertaking such a monumental history, we gain a crucial layer of insight not only into the world of Socrates and Plato, but also into the very nature of historical inquiry itself. It reminds us that history is never a mere recounting of objective facts, but an active process of interpretation, profoundly shaped by the perspectives, values, and even the political commitments of the historian. Grote's work serves as a powerful and enduring example of how a historian's deeply held worldview can profoundly reshape our understanding of the past, offering us a vital lesson in critically engaging with the sources we encounter and the minds behind them. Welcome back to our journey through the intellectual landscape meticulously charted by George Grote. As we conclude our exploration of Plato and the vibrant tapestry woven by Socrates' other companions, it's natural to wonder, does any of this truly resonate in our hyper-modern, technologically driven 21st century? The answer, I contend, is a resounding yes. In fact, the echoes of their debates are everywhere, shaping the very fabric of our contemporary dilemmas. Consider first the Socratic method, that relentless pursuit of truth through questioning assumptions, challenging received wisdom, and exposing inconsistencies. In an age drowning in information, much of it unverified or deliberately misleading, the Socratic method isn't merely an academic exercise, it's a vital survival skill. From navigating complex news cycles rife with misinformation and disinformation to dissecting clickbait headlines and echo chamber pronouncements, the ability to ask incisive questions, to critically evaluate sources, and to articulate logical arguments is more crucial than ever. Socrates' legacy empowers us to be active, discerning thinkers, rather than passive recipients of narratives designed to manipulate. It's the antidote to intellectual complacency, fostering the critical thinking muscles essential for informed citizenship and personal autonomy. Then there's the timeless debate among Socrates' followers concerning the good life itself. On one side, we find the radical simplicity advocated by figures like Antisthenes, the progenitor of cynicism, who championed virtue through self-sufficiency and a profound detachment from material possessions and societal conventions. On the other, the nascent seeds of hedonism and Epicureanism, which, while often misunderstood, explored the pursuit of pleasure, whether physical, intellectual, or spiritual, as a path to tranquility and fulfillment. Fast forward to today, and these ancient philosophical tensions manifest in our own lifestyle choices. We grapple with the allure of minimalism versus the relentless pull of consumerism. Do we seek experiences over possessions, or do we find comfort and status in accumulating material wealth? The debate between finding contentment in bare necessities and pursuing sophisticated pleasures, of valuing inner peace over outward show, is a direct inheritance from these early Socratic schools. Are we more fulfilled by a smaller, more intentional life, or by the endless pursuit of the next purchase, the next trend? And what of Plato's grand, often challenging, political questions? His tireless quest for justice, his deep concerns about governance, the role of truth in public discourse, and the dangers of ignorance or demagoguery in shaping society. These aren't distant historical musings, they are the very struggles we face daily. From the polarization of our political landscapes to debates over the efficacy and ethics of our democratic institutions, from the challenge of holding leaders accountable to discerning objective truth amidst competing narratives, Plato's inquiries ring disturbingly familiar. How do we ensure just governance? What constitutes a good society? How do we prevent the erosion of civic virtue? These are not settled questions, but ongoing, urgent dialogues in every nation, every community. The foundations of these debates were laid millennia ago by Plato, grappling with the legacy of his mentor's unjust execution. So, as we close this particular volume of Grote's monumental work, we come to a profound realization. We are not merely reading about ancient philosophers, we are, in a very real sense, their contemporaries. We are all, in some fundamental way, still companions of Socrates. Whether consciously or unconsciously, we continue to grapple with the profound ethical, epistemological, and political questions he first posed, and which his diverse circle of followers expanded upon. The clarity of Grote's scholarship illuminates not just their world, but our own, providing tools and frameworks to navigate the complexities of modern existence. The questions posed in ancient Athens remain our questions, forever inviting us to engage, to question, to seek, and to live more thoughtfully examined lives. Welcome to your action plan, the 7-day Socratic Challenge. We've explored Grote's insights into Plato. Now it's time to apply Socratic methods daily, transforming passive learning into active practice. Are you ready? Day 1. Question a core belief. Choose one deeply held assumption about yourself or the world. Subject it to Socratic examination. Why do I believe this? What evidence supports it? Is it reliable? What if the opposite were true? What are the implications? Aim for clarity, understanding your beliefs, foundations, and vulnerabilities. Day 2. Practice cynic simplicity. For one day, live with absolute essentials. Inspired by Diogenes, consider your true basic needs. Can you forego non-essential comforts like extra screens or elaborate meals? Observe the impact this shift has on your perception of value and inner state. Discover liberating freedom in mindful reduction. Day 3. Find a hedonistic joy. Redefine hedonism. Choose one simple, profound pleasure today and mindfully savor it, perhaps the warmth of your morning tea, the texture of a piece of fruit, a moment listening to music, or the feel of sunshine on your skin. Eliminate distractions, be present, and truly appreciate its beauty. Cultivate gratitude and a deeper connection. Day 4. Have a true dialogue. Engage in conversation with someone, a friend, family member, or colleague solely to understand their perspective, not to win an argument. Practice active listening. Ask open-ended questions like, "Can you tell me more about why you feel that way?" Resist interrupting or formulating rebuttals. Simply listen, absorb, and clarify. Socratic dialogue seeks mutual exploration. Day 5. Contemplate an ideal form. Dedicate 10 minutes to Platonic contemplation. Choose an abstract concept like courage or friendship. Reflect, what is its pure, perfect, ideal form, unblemished by circumstance or self-interest? How does it manifest in its purest essence? This exercise helps sharpen your understanding of ideals, providing a benchmark for real-world instances. Day 6. Read an original. Engage directly with the source material. Find and read a short Socratic dialogue by Plato, such as Crito. These texts offer a direct window into Socrates' challenges. Crito, for instance, explores themes of justice, law, and civic duty. Don't just read, engage with the arguments and reflect on the questions raised. Day 7. Define your good life. Conclude your Socratic challenge by journaling for 15 minutes on what a virtuous and happy life means to you. Synthesize the week's insights. How have your assumptions shifted? What values are clearer? How do simplicity, mindful pleasure, true dialogue, and ideal forms contribute to your vision of eudaimonia, the flourishing life? Outline your unique philosophical path. This 7-day Socratic challenge is an initiation. Philosophy is a lifelong journey of questioning, exploring, and applying. We encourage you to continue these practices, adapting them to your own curiosity. Share your experiences. Let this challenge be the beginning of a deeper engagement with ancient wisdom and indeed with yourself. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual adventure. As we conclude our deep dive into George Grote's monumental work on Plato and the companions of Socrates, let's distill our journey into 3 unforgettable, high-impact takeaways. These aren't just historical notes, they're potent insights ready to reshape how you think, question, and ultimately, how you live. First, and perhaps most crucially, there was no single Socrates. When we envision Socrates, we typically summon Plato's towering figure, but Grote painstakingly shows Socrates' true legacy is far richer, more complex, and more human. He wasn't a monolithic sage. His influence ignited a vibrant, often contradictory, conversation among diverse minds. Think of Xenophon's practical, grounded Socrates, or the cynic's radically ascetic version. These aren't merely rival accounts, their very diversity is the point. It highlights that Socrates' genius lay not in delivering dogmatic answers, but in inspiring a multiplicity of interpretations, each grappling with profound questions. To grasp Socrates fully is to appreciate this lively intellectual ecosystem, a testament to his multifaceted impact. Embrace the chorus of voices, not just a solo performance. Our second crucial insight: the question is the answer. In an age demanding quick solutions, the Socratic spirit, illuminated by Grote, reminds us that true power resides not in possessing answers, but in cultivating the courage to relentlessly question everything, especially ourselves. Socrates and his companions didn't offer a static philosophical system. Instead, he presented a dynamic method, persistent inquiry, a relentless elenchus that chipped away at assumptions, exposed contradictions, and fostered intellectual humility. It was a rigorous mental workout demanding self-examination and a willingness to admit ignorance. This wasn't destruction for its own sake, but clearing intellectual clutter for genuine understanding. The Socratic method wasn't merely a means to an end. The ongoing act of questioning, of continually probing and challenging, was the answer itself, revealing deeper truths through inquiry. Intellectual integrity stems from the journey of interrogation, not solely the arrival at a conclusion. Finally, and deeply resonant for our own existence, philosophy is a way of life. For Plato, Socrates, Xenophon, and their successors, philosophy was never an abstract academic exercise confined to texts or debates. Grote reveals a world where ideas weren't just for contemplation, they were active blueprints for living, shaping character, guiding ethical conduct, and navigating life's complexities. These thinkers didn't just propose theories, they demonstrated modes of being. Whether cynics embraced simplicity or Plato envisioned an ideal state, their convictions directly informed their actions, choices, and worldview. Their philosophy intertwined with paideia, the holistic formation of a virtuous citizen. It wasn't about what you said, it was about what you did, how you conducted yourself, and how principles manifested in daily reality. This ancient perspective reminds us true philosophy transcends mere intellectual curiosity. It demands practical application, transforming ideas into lived realities, proving wisdom is ultimately measured by how we live, not just what we know. We've journeyed deep into the intellectual heart of ancient Athens, traversing the intricate landscape of George Grote's Plato and the other companions of Socrates' Third Ed. Volume 2. Through Grote's meticulous, almost encyclopedic scholarship, we've not only encountered Plato, but also given due recognition to the vibrant, often contrasting, constellation of thinkers who orbited around Socrates. We've explored the nuanced philosophies that shaped the very foundations of Western thought, from the towering, transcendent idealism often associated with Plato himself, to the stark, ascetic minimalism championed by figures like Antisthenes, and even the practical, pleasure-seeking approach to life sometimes attributed to Aristippus. These companions, each with their own distinct voice and vision, wrestled with universal questions that resonate profoundly with our own lives today. What truly constitutes the good life? What is the nature of virtue? How ought we as individuals and as a society to live in order to achieve eudaimonia, that flourishing state of well-being? Grote's work invites us not just to observe, but to participate, to reflect on these historical debates as if they were unfolding in our own agora. Now, as we draw this particular segment to a close, I invite you to step out of the role of passive observer and into a modern, vibrant dialogue. As you've listened to our exploration of these foundational ideas, and perhaps considered how they manifest in your own worldview, which companion of Socrates do you find yourself relating to most? Are you drawn to the ambitious, conceptual architecture of the idealist? Do you find solace in the self-sufficiency and simplicity of the minimalist? Or perhaps do you appreciate the nuanced pursuit of well-being inherent in the approach of the hedonist? Perhaps you see a compelling blend of these philosophies within yourself, or even find a surprising kinship with another, lesser-known figure Grote so carefully introduces. Whatever your inclination, share your thoughts, your reflections, and your own burgeoning philosophical leanings in the comments below. Your unique perspective, your personal engagement, truly enriches this growing community, transforming a simple viewing experience into a shared, dynamic intellectual adventure that continues long after the video ends. This exploration, much like Socrates' own relentless and lifelong questioning, is an ongoing process, a journey without a final destination, only ever expanding horizons. If this journey through the philosophical landscapes of ancient Athens has sparked your curiosity, ignited new thoughts, or deepened your appreciation for the enduring foundations of Western philosophy, please consider supporting our ongoing work. It is your engagement, your interest, that fuels these deep dives into foundational texts and ideas that often go unexplored in the mainstream. Take a moment to like this video. A simple click makes a real difference. Subscribe to the channel to ensure you become a permanent part of our intellectual community, and crucially, hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the minds that shaped our world and continue to challenge our present. But the dialogue, the true essence of philosophical inquiry, shouldn't end solely between you and us, or even within the comments section alone. Philosophy thrives on conversation, on the direct, often challenging, but always rewarding exchange of ideas that refine and expand our understanding. I genuinely encourage you to share this video with just one friend, that one friend who you love having deep, meaningful, and sometimes even delightfully provocative conversations with. Imagine the discussions you could spark together, the new perspectives you could uncover as you both reflect on Grote's unparalleled insights into these ancient thinkers and their timeless questions. Let's extend this intellectual ripple effect, one thoughtful share at a time, inviting more voices into this ever-unfolding dialogue. Finally, as we part ways for now, I want to leave you with a personal challenge, a modern Socratic provocation for your own continuing philosophical journey. In the spirit of Socrates, who relentlessly examined the unexamined life, I invite you to consider this. What is one assumption you're going to challenge this week? It could be a deeply held personal belief you've always taken for granted, a common societal norm you've never truly questioned, or even a subtle prejudice or bias you didn't realize you held until now. Take that first step, however small, to critically examine one small corner of your own intellectual landscape. Engage with the world and with yourself a little more critically, a little more thoughtfully, and a little more courageously. Your philosophical journey is a lifelong endeavor, unfolding one question, one challenge, and one examined assumption at a time. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual quest. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you.